Namaskaram, friends. As you all know, I have been a very strong supporter of subcategorization among the scheduled caste community, and I have aired my views in various forms, in various media, newspapers, YouTube channels, given my articles in support of subcategorization at various times. So even in Karnataka, I was one of the strongest advocate for subcategorization. I have went to the Nagmohan Das Commission, presented detailed reports 3 times, so not even one time. So we have tried to help the commission to come to a logical conclusion because we always believe that we should work with commissions and then we have to solve a complex problems like this because it's going to affect a lot of people, including me, because see, it will affect my children's reservation benefits in the state. So I had always thought that the subcategorization, see, the first thing is that it has to adhere to the various guidelines which has been placed by the Supreme Court. The second thing is that it should be done in a very fair manner so that nobody faces hurdles in getting these benefits. It should not create any operational problems in getting these benefits. So I was always thinking that a solution should be designed in such a way that minimal damage should be done to the people who are there in the state. So, my friends, today we are going to place some of the arguments which will clearly shows that the subcategorization order which has been passed in the Karnataka state does not satisfy certain guidelines which are placed by the Supreme Court. So I'm going to take you through this in very detail because this is a report which is very detailed. We have done a very detailed analysis of this analysis of the effective representation of various subcastes in Karnataka. But before that, I saw some of the tweets in my Twitter handle which told that, sir, like, what is effective representation? Why you should not take total employment? Why you have to take only group A, group B? So all these questions you will understand once we understand the legal principles behind this. So the first legal principle I want to take you through this is called the effective representation. Effective representation. What is effective representation? So where is this coming from? So I'm going to take you to the order of the Supreme Court, which was passed by Chandrachud sir. So I'm going to take you to that order so that you understand where it comes from. Because see, tomorrow you should not tell that I am telling this from somewhere. It is not that. So this is the extracts of the order. So my friend, so this is the extracts of the order. So this is in the part D, the big order which is there. This is around 300-page order. So para 167. So you can see this 101, page 115. So many people don't read these parts and they tell that there is nothing called effective representation. So here the Honorable Chief Justice of India discusses in detail what is the requirement of effective representation. So what I'll tell you in brief. So before actually coming into this, you people have to understand what is adequate representation. See, adequate representation as a concept came during the Miller's Commission. See, you know the Wadeyars, correct? So who introduced the reservation for the first time in Karnataka in 1910. In 1910, there was a movement because wherein all the backward classes and the scheduled caste, they went to the Wadeyar, the king, and they told that, see, we see only the Brahmins in the public services and there are no other castes who are represented adequately in the public services. Then Wadeyars appointed this Miller's committee, and that Miller's committee for the first time they introduced the word adequate representation. So they told that, see, it's a fact that only few castes dominate the public services. So in order to provide equal opportunities to every caste, they should be adequately represented. Everybody should be adequately represented in the government services, and that is the reason why reservations have to be given. So this was the fundamental basis of giving reservations. So now what happened, my friends? This got interpreted in a numerical sense. Like when it got implemented in the constitution, it got interpreted in numerical sense. In the numerical sense, what we say is that people started taking the total employment. Total employment. Like for example, if there are 100 jobs, and then 100 jobs, like some 20 jobs are represented by the scheduled caste, they tell that the scheduled castes are represented very effectively. That is adequately represented. So the total employment was taken as the numerical basis for calculating the adequate representation. But now there was a serious issue. When we drill down into this employment pattern which is there among the scheduled castes, you will start noticing that most of the scheduled castes are employed in Group D jobs, that is Safai Karmachari jobs and or menial jobs or Group C jobs. Nobody is there in Group A and Group B. So what happened was, in Group A and Group B, people are not there. Group C and Group D, people are there. So as a result of this, it gives a very skewed distribution. And also the proportion of employment in Group A, number of employees in Group A is lesser. It is, and Group D, there are more number of employees because Group A is more of managerial, supervisory job and also guested officers, top end jobs. The Group B, Group C, Group D are the ground level staff field. So you tend to have more number of people in Group C, Group D. So when you take the total employment, you get a skewed picture because you have a more representation in people. There are more number of people in Group C, Group D. So because of that, the caste appears as if they are more represented. I had spoken about this even in the case of Uttar Pradesh, where what people say is that the caste chamars are very adequately represented in the state services, but nobody tells how much they are represented in Group A service. My friends, I have to tell you, this has resulted in a serious problem in the Patna High Court, where the Bihar caste census got challenged. So I have to take you to that Bihar order. So this is actually the Bihar order, High Court order, where the caste census of the Bihar was challenged. Now, my friend, you see this nitty-gritties, the data nitty-gritties, how the high courts interpret this, and you have to see that, how we have to be very, very careful in interpreting the data. Now, see, this is para 63 of that High Court order, the Patna High Court order, which says, like, we would now look at the caste. I'm going to read out this because I want you to get into this in very deep way, because you should understand there is a serious issue in using adequate representation as a metric for determining backwardness. Okay, so we have to be very careful. So when it went to the Patna High Court, the Patna High Court has stated this against this caste census which happened recently in Bihar. We would now look at the caste survey report relied on by the state to project inadequate representation of the various backward caste and general category people, for which we extract the following columns from the caste survey. So this table has been given here. So here, what they did was, the first they took this figure, person working in government sector, total number of persons. They divided 641,281 divided by 2 crores, 3.19. Then 621,481 divided by this. 461,725 divided by this. 291,004 divided by this. 30,164 divided by. So you got this. So undoubtedly, what the High Court says is only 1.57% of the total population is employed in government services. And when we look at the proportion of the employees in each of the category, as compared to the total population of each such category, definitely the open category has an edge. That is, for example, 3.19%. However, when we compare the ratio of representation of backward classes in the government employment, which has to be computed on the total number of government employment. So now what the High Court does is, it takes this total 20,49,370 and it divides it by 621,481. 621,481 divided by 20,49,370 total employment. So what it tells is that out of the other backward classes have a presence of 621,481 out of total of 20,49,370 government employees, which makes the representation at 30.32%. Insofar as the extremely backward community, the percentage of representation is 22.53, the SC is 14.19 and ST is 1.47. So what the High Court says is that these backward classes together, everyone, SC, ST, OBCs together, they occupy 68.52% of the total employees. Okay, so 68.52% of the total employees, which just leaves 31.48% to the unreserved category. So what they come to a conclusion is that, see, why do you need the reservations to be raised beyond 50%? Because this is clearly showing that actually general category is underrepresented while the backward category is more represented. So what they mention is that we perfectly realize that the percentage of the backward communities in the government employees is not so solely through appointment by virtue of reservation. There definitely would be appointment made from meritorious candidate. Be that as may be, the fact remains that backward communities are adequately represented in public employment by virtue of reservation and also merit, which is an indication of one or another caste or community having reaped the benefits of reservation and the various beneficial welfare scheme implemented by the state in achieving an element of social capital. There is no requirement for enhancement of reservation. So this is the primary argument, my friends, which the BR cash census was knocked off. So what they did was they took the total proportion of the total employment and they told that where are you inadequately represented? The backward classes, the AC, STs, you keep telling that you are not represented, but when I see the total employment, you are adequately represented. So, my friend, this is a big problem in the Bihar caste census. Bihar caste census did not give the data of Group A, Group B, Group C, Group D. So, when you don't give Group A, Group B, Group C, Group D bifurcation, obviously what will happen is they'll take the total employment and they have created a metric like this, which is against us. But now, if you go to other subcategorization orders and other things, there clearly what we start seeing is that they consider only Group A, Group B, and they don't take the Group C, Group D, because Group C, Group D is a low-end menial jobs or Safai Karmachari jobs, which are actually like, they're not the decision-making job. There is no need of reservation in all these places. Do you need reservations for Safai Karmachari jobs? I seriously disagree. So in this way, what happened was, this problem was effectively handled by Honorable Chief Justice of India, Chandrachud sir, because I have great respect for him, because the way he has drafted the subcategorization order, he brought in a new concept called effective representation in that order. So I'm going to show you what is that effective representation. I'm coming to his order now. It is discussed in part D. So you can see that this is part D of the order. So you can see this is in page number 115. So what he mentions is that, see, we are making a big mistake by taking the total employment for determining the adequate representation of a caste. Okay. So what he mentions is that, like, see, if we know that like the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, or even the backward classes, they are more represented in the lower end jobs. If you add up everything and then tell that they are not represented, that is not correct. What we need to understand is that we have to take the decision making job, which is more important in this case. So now, my friends, so I'm going to read out this, why he mentions that there is a need for effective representation, not adequate representation. See, conventionally, the state has assessed if the class is adequately represented by comparing the representation of the class in the services to the total population of the state. That is, they compare total employment to total population. However, adequacy of representation, when determined purely from numerical perspective without accounting for factors such as representation versus post, would dilute the purpose of the provision. The objective of Article 16.4 is to ensure effective representation of the class in the services of the state across posts and grades. Classes which are socially backward occupy the lowest of the social strata primarily because of the traditional occupation accorded to the class by social rules. For example, certain Dalit castes are regarded as scavenger castes. Even with the provision of reservation, it is very difficult for the backward classes to shed the traditional occupation that is ascribed to them by society and optimize the opportunities even at the lowest level. The struggles that the class faces do not disappear with the representation in the lower grades. The endeavor is to ensure true and effective representation of the socially backward classes across post. So this is the main thing. Opportunities for real and effective representation must be created in all posts and grades. The objective of the provision is not to emulate the existing social hierarchy where the low grade posts are occupied by the socially backward, while supervisory and managerial posts continue to be occupied by the advanced caste. If the objective of Article 16.4 is to be achieved in the truest sense, the inadequacy of representation must not be determined only on the basis of total number of members of the backward class in the services of the state, but by assessing the representation of class across various posts. So this is what is effective representation. You should look at what is the representation in supervisory and managerial posts. So this is a classic judgment by Honorable CGI where it's such a favorable order to us. I have never seen any judge writing this, my friends. So he discusses this in entirety, and then he also gives example of what Justice Jeevan Reddy told in Indira Sahani's case. So Justice Jeevan Reddy, I'm going to read out what is there in the order. Justice Jeevan Reddy also adapted a value-ridden interpretation of the phrase adequately represented in Indira Sahani. The learned judge held that the principal test to determine the adequacy of representation is effective representation or effective voice in the administration, and not mere numerical presence. Effective representation can only be achieved in this view when there is adequate representation at all levels or posts in the administration. So see the beauty of this argument, my friends. You should have an effective voice in the administration. It is not necessary if you have some representation in Group C and Group D and no representation in Group A, Group B. So adequately represented means it is effective representation or you have an effective voice in the administration. That is what is coming out from the order. Now, he goes on to discuss this further and then he puts down this. We are in complete agreement with opinions of Justice Jeevan Reddy in Indira Sahani and Justice Gajendra Kadar in Rangachari on this aspect which is being discussed in the present segment. Adequate representation means meaningful and effective representation. The sphere of public services is a constitutionally recognized realm for reservation because being a part of the administrative mechanism of the state is itself an indicator of social power. It is for the same reason for the constitution when it was adopted guaranteed reservation in the legislation. However, there exists a hierarchy in social power within the sphere of public service. Positions that are higher up in the pyramid are positions that command greater authority. For example, let us assume a situation where the class 3 and class 4 posts in the state are filled by members of certain class, where the higher positions of authority and power are filled by members of a certain class. This democratic of representation, if the service is taken as a whole unit, does not paint a realistic picture of inequality that persists within the sphere. If numerical representation is used as an indicator, provision for representation will have to be made in favor of classes which are unrepresented in class 3 and class 4, which does not align with the purpose of the provision. So what they clearly mention is that, see, you should not take class 3 and class 4 when you are computing the effective representation. My dear friends, so I have put my arguments and they lay down the principle that the subcategorization should be based on effective representation. But my friends, I have to tell you, which I'm going to show you in the next video, that the government again made a blunder. They took the absolute number of total employment. They never considered how many people are there in Group A and Group B, and completely created a order which does not satisfy the effective representation test. So this is why this legal arguments I'm placing before you, my friends, so that you understand why these principles have to be followed. So I'm going to now go into the next data analysis in my next video. Please watch that. This is one of the best videos I've done, and I'm sure that everybody will benefit and many state governments will also benefit from this analysis. Thank you.